Tonight, somewhere on Earth, someone is eating ice cream. Every second, the world goes through roughly 500 liters of ice cream. That's about 4,000 scoops disappearing every second. In 1 minute, that becomes nearly 250,000 scoops. Ice cream feels normal now. But for most of human history, eating something frozen in the summer was almost impossible. Because before modern refrigeration, humans had to figure out how to keep ice from melting. So the real story is not just who invented ice cream, it's how ancient people turned one of the most fragile things on Earth into one of history's most impossible luxuries. Our story starts long before modern ice cream existed. Thousands of years ago, humans already understood something important: cold, preserved food. People in freezing northern regions stored meat and fish in snow because frozen food lasted longer. Historians describe ice pits and ice houses in Mesopotamia nearly 4,000 years ago, and later ice storage traditions across Persia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, and China. But Persia turned ice storage into engineering. Much of Persia was hot, dry, and difficult to cool, so Persian engineers had to solve a strange problem. How do you make ice in a desert and keep it frozen long enough to matter? Their answer was one of the ancient world's closest things to a refrigerator. They built enormous structures called yakhchāls. The word literally means ice pit. And these things looked like giant alien domes rising out of the sand. Some were over 60 feet tall. Beneath the dome was a deep storage chamber where cold air naturally sank. The dome shape helped hot air rise and escape through the top, while the thick underground walls slowed heat from getting in. The walls were sometimes 2 meters thick and made with sarouge, a waterproof insulating mortar made from materials like clay, sand, lime, ash, goat hair, and egg whites. This helped block heat and keep the chamber cool for months. But the craziest part wasn't the storage. It was how they made the ice in the first place. Next to these domes, they built shallow pools. During winter nights, water from underground aqueducts, called qanats, flowed into these pools. Now here's where the science gets weird. Desert air is extremely dry, and when the sky is clear at night, heat radiates upward incredibly efficiently, so the water in the pools would literally beam its heat out into space. This process is called radiative cooling, and it worked so well that thin sheets of ice could form even when the air temperature was technically above freezing. In the mornings, workers smashed the frozen sheets into chunks and carried them into the underground yakhchāl chambers, where the thick insulation kept them frozen for months. And Persians didn't just use this ice for preservation. They used it for dessert. One famous example is faloodeh, a Persian frozen dessert still eaten today, made with thin noodles, frozen rosewater syrup, and often lime juice or sour cherry. And this is important because faloodeh provides some of the earliest written evidence of humans intentionally creating frozen desserts. They also created chilled drinks called sharbat, made from fruit syrups, rosewater, saffron, and snow or ice. Over time, words like sharbat, sherbet, and sorbet traveled through languages and cultures. So every time somebody orders sorbet today, they're tasting part of an ancient idea. While Persia solved the problem with architecture, China solved it with bureaucracy. During the Zhou dynasty, the Chinese imperial government created an official department dedicated to harvesting, storing, and distributing ice. The workers were called the Lingren, the icemen. Their job was to cut blocks of ice from frozen rivers during winter, store them in insulated ice houses, and make sure enough survived into the warmer months. But eventually, Chinese experimentation went beyond preserving ice. Some historians describe early Chinese frozen mixtures made with milk or rice, cooled with snow and mineral salts. This matters because it reveals one of the biggest breakthroughs in dessert history: freezing point depression. Normally, ice alone only cools something to about 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold, but not enough to freeze sweet cream properly. If you mix salt or saltpeter into ice, the melting point drops dramatically. The mixture becomes far colder than regular ice. So if you place a container of sweet milk inside this super chilled mixture, the milk freezes. That same basic science shows up centuries later in old-fashioned hand-crank ice cream makers. And later, during the Tang Dynasty, food historians describe elite frozen dairy desserts made from fermented buffalo milk flavored with camphor. Then there was Rome. Workers hauled snow down from the Alps and nearby mountains, packed in straw and cloth. Emperor Nero supposedly ordered snow brought from the mountains so he could flavor it with honey and fruit. Some historians debate parts of the Nero story, but wealthy Romans absolutely used imported snow to chill drinks and desserts. The Romans used specialized vessels like the sictor to keep wine cool. The wine vessel could sit inside a larger bowl filled with snow or chilled water, cooling the drink without mixing dirty mountain snow into it. Cold desserts became associated with wealth across the Mediterranean world, and eventually these frozen traditions began spreading westward. The most believable path into Europe did not come from a single explorer with a secret recipe. It came through trade, conquest, and empires. As empires expanded into Sicily and Spain during the 8th and 9th centuries, they brought Persian-influenced sharbat, sugar cultivation, citrus, and a taste for chilled drinks and frozen desserts. This is probably the true bridge between ancient Persian sharbat and European sorbet. But the written recipes we would recognize as closer to ice cream appear much later. By the 1600s, Italy had become Europe's frozen dessert laboratory. Confectioners were experimenting with ices, creams, fruit, sugar, and snow. Then, in the late 1690s, a Neapolitan chef named Antonio Latini published a recipe for a milk-based sorbet, one of the earliest written recipes that actually starts to look like modern ice cream. From there, France refined the idea even further. French cooks added richer custards, egg yolks, and cream, creating smoother frozen desserts that moved closer to French-style ice cream. But for centuries, this was still food for the elite, because storing ice was still incredibly difficult. You basically needed servants, underground storage, harvested winter ice, and enough wealth to casually maintain a private refrigeration system. So for normal people, ice cream might as well have been treasure. Then in the 1800s, industrial ice harvesting exploded in America. Huge blocks of ice were cut from frozen lakes and shipped around the country. A Boston businessman named Frederick Tudor became so successful selling harvested ice that people literally called him the Ice King. And suddenly, ordinary people could access cold storage. Then came another breakthrough. In 1843, Nancy Johnson patented the hand-crank ice cream churn. The machine constantly stirred the freezing cream while salt and ice cooled the outer chamber. This prevented giant ice crystals from forming and whipped air into the mixture, which is why modern ice cream feels smooth instead of crunchy. And from there, ice cream absolutely exploded. Street vendors sold penny ice cream. Ice cream parlors appeared everywhere. Then, at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, a shortage of serving dishes supposedly led a waffle vendor to roll waffles into cones for ice cream. Multiple people claimed to invent the ice cream cone, so historians still debate the exact story. But the World's Fair undeniably popularized it, and suddenly ice cream stopped being royal luxury. It became normal life. Today, ice cream exists in almost every culture on Earth. Italian gelato, Turkish dondurma, Japanese mochi ice cream, American soft serve. But underneath all of it are thousands of years of human experimentation and generations of people obsessed with accomplishing one very specific goal, making summer slightly less miserable. So next time you eat ice cream, remember, you're not just eating dessert. You're eating an ancient craving humans spent thousands of years trying to keep cold.